Welcome to Ready for Mistakes. I'm your host, Jeff Smoody. This is a podcast where I interview photographers and photo adjacent people about their work, their practice, all that jazz, their research, you name it. If this is your first episode tuning in today, welcome. I'm really happy to have you here. Hope you stick around. And if this is a returning episode for you, welcome back. Thank you for listening. I hope you guys have really been enjoying this season 5 as it's been coming out. I've been getting a lot out of it, and I've been really enjoying these conversations, having these conversations, getting to know the people and the work that they make even more than just through a screen or just passing conversations, So this is one of my favorite ways to really dive into people's work. So I hope that you guys get as much, if not more, out of it than I do. It's a very fruitful thing, I always hope. This episode today is a conversation with Rich Dachtera, who is a New York-based photographer who I actually met in person for the first time at the ICP Photo Book Fest in October 2025. Sadly, not able to get to the 2026 one this year. It was a lot earlier than I expected. But it was great to meet Rich in person, very out of nowhere, seemingly. I ran into a handful of really great friends at the ICP Photo Book Fest in 2025. So hope to make it out there again soon and see more familiar faces. Before diving into this conversation, I'll read a quick bio about Rich and his work. Rich Dachtera is a fourth-generation New Yorker who grew up 2 blocks from the ocean in Rockaway, Queens. His photographs concern dislocation and the way perception shifts under pressure. The moment when a familiar place tips a few degrees and becomes something else. He believes some images exist before they are taken, that arriving at a specific time and place is less of an act of creation than of retrieval. He's also attended the Penumbra Foundation long-term photo book program in 2025. Was also a reviewed individual at the Chico Review in 2025. Has done the Critical Decisions Perspectives on the Creative Process with Todd Heido in 2024, and the Stanley Barker Winter Masterclass in 2024. So that's a bit about Rich and his work. For those of you that are unfamiliar with his work, definitely go check out his social media and his website portfolio, both of which are linked in the show notes. He's got some really fantastic work. I'm excited to see where his project Swell, which is the primary focus of today's conversation, where that will be going, especially after the Penumbra Foundation long-term photo book program that he brought that book to. So that's about it for the intro. So let's dive on into this conversation with Rich Dachtera. Hi, Rich. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Hey, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So we're going to be talking about one of your recent projects, and before getting into the weeds on that, tell me about how you got into photography and art in general.
Yeah, well, so growing up, I was always a bit of a artistic kid. So my mom would take reams of paper from work and bring them home so I can draw. And I would tear through these reams of paper, and I would sit and watch cartoons and constantly, it was always in our living room paper for me to kind of like sketch with. And I still draw every now and then. And my wife likes to watercolor, so I have the opportunity to sometimes draw something and she'll watercolor it as well. After that, my mom always had a film camera in the house, or she was kind of the shutterbug. And in college, I actually took my illustrations a little bit further, and I did a webcomic series, 2 of them for a while. And then one of them got picked up by a small newspaper in the Midwest, and so I had a couple of strips in a newspaper, which was kind of cool. And then, it's just something I've always been. I'm kind of art doesn't run too much in the family, or it is there, but quietly. And so it kind of just picked up with me. And I think I kind of landed as photography as my way of kind of communicating. It's been a bit of a journey, and we'll drill into it, I guess, as we chat a little bit more. Yeah. But it's just if I don't make any work or something creative at least once a week, or I get cranky. Like it's just like it's like something. Yeah. I'm a scratch I'm not itching.
Yeah, exactly. And you were pretty much self-taught then. Like your photo education side of things is more so workshops and such that you've done, less like formal higher education.
Yeah, no, there was nothing formal. I mean, in college, I did do a darkroom class for black and white, and college was a very, I'm 42 at the time of this recording, 43 in 4 weeks, but my college years were not only the Napster years, but my college years were also the kind of the very decline of film photography and moving into digital. My friend in college had the original Sony CyberShot.
Nice.
But after that,
those are worth good money these days.
Probably, damn. But after college, I was always a bit of a shutterbug. I photographed my friends, and I'd make air quotes art photos and just things that would catch my eye. And but I started taking it more seriously in my 30s, and then I kind of hobbled together I started off with like YouTube videos, and then moving on to certain classes on Creative Live and lynda.com, and learning how to properly use Lightroom and Photoshop, and then I moved up to workshops in person. And last year I did Chico Review, and I was in the Penumbra Foundation long-term photo book program. So keep applying for grants now, and shows, and like everyone else, trying to keep pushing it, see where it goes.
Exactly. And one thing that I've always I'm obviously a big proponent of art education and going to college for art and all that, but I've also been very open about the fact that it is not for everyone, because like in your case, you've found your own kind of sort of photo education on your own, which is something that I feel like there's a lot of talk about, like the MFA programs and everything, as someone who went to an MFA program. And I've been, just as one of my ADHD rabbit holes I've been going down right now, I've been kind of starting to like trace my academia family tree. And at a certain point, I start to get to teachers that don't have a single degree in photography. They might not even have a degree at all. Or if they do, it's like something totally out of left field. And it's interesting because it's like some of these people would have degrees, like Harry Callahan, for example. Like I can trace my lineage back to Harry Callahan because he had taught at RISD, but he had a degree in engineering. And went to Illinois Institute of Technology for their design program, which was at the time called the New Bauhaus, because of Laszlo Moholy-Nagy, one of the founding members of that. And he's like, oh yeah, you're doing this incredible work. It's Harry frickin' Callahan. And like looking back now, it's like, dude didn't have an MFA, did engineering as his like professional work until he got into the art world. So for folks listening, that is like totally a viable way to go about things. You don't have to have a prestigious university on your CV to be able to make your way through this world. And
I would say you can MacGyver. Well, I don't know if people get that reference, but you could hobble together a really great education. And what's nice is you have the opportunity to, if you do it kind of piecemeal like I did, you can do it at your own pace. You're not dropping all that money at once. You're not kind of, I gotta, I have a 9 to 5, so I would love to kind of take a year off and get an MFA and do that. But at the same time, I've been kind of going back and forth on like, would I ever do it, even if I could?
Yeah.
Because where do you go from here? Kind of at some point you just make work. And I get a lot of, I'm fortunate enough to be, I'm based in Brooklyn, and there's a lot of photography community here. And so you can go to see a lot of talks and lectures and, and keep yourself sharp. But also with YouTube now, and like podcasts, the reaching these people are so accessible, and getting wisdom that could spread is so much more widely available. It's one of the few good things the internet still does.
You've been doing this thing for a while at this point, and I'm curious about like how you started to find the subject matter, both like formally and conceptually, that you have been drawn to make your artwork about.
Yeah, it's been a road. It's been a journey. Like most, I kind of stumbled, and I kind of went around and tried everything for a while because I knew I loved to make photos, but I, air quotes, didn't find my voice yet. So I would say I spent years kind of just photographing whatever. And I do, it's funny, I kind of wish I can go back to that mindset. I'm trying to do more of stop editing myself before I make a photo and just make photos. And it doesn't have to be something I put on Instagram. Then I would say there's so much work I make that I don't put anywhere. It just lives in my hard drive. And it's kind of nice knowing that it's just going to live there. And then, maybe one day it'll be part of something. But my particular style, or I would say the DNA kind of finally gets expressed, was the project we'll talk about today is the title is called Swell. And about 7 years now, my mother passed away, and I was living in Seattle, and I moved out there for work. And I'm an only child. I grew up in Rockaway, Queens, which is a beach town. Most people don't know Brooklyn has quite a large beach. So I went home, obviously, and I went back home for a whole month. And, it was the summer. She passed away in July. And at the end of the day, after both, I would stay home with my father, and I was working remotely. I would take one of his bikes out and just kind of go and photograph Reese Park and the Fort Tilden, which is based in Queens. And it was kind of this project that really, I stopped caring and just photographed. I was in my feels, I was mourning, and I was photographing the same time every day. And there was no project planned. It wasn't something I was going to eventually, I wasn't thinking that far ahead. I was just making work. And it was kind of, I remember the photo. It's actually probably my most known photo of these like red leaves and a handball court of a kind of a broken handball court. And I remember just being like, I just photographed it because I felt like that was already inside my head. That photo, I was like, that's in my brain now, and it's outside, and I'm going to kind of connect the two now. And I noticed what that felt like, and I started following that feeling when I make my art. And that's kind of, and I was just kind of doing that over the summers for at least 5 years. Every time I go down to see my father and check in on him, I would take the bike out at night. I would just go make work. It was my time of day. And, but that's a very long roundabout answer for you. Yeah.
One of the things I noted is exactly what you mentioned. Like, you were taking photos at about the same time every day, and like as an outside viewer of this work, like I don't know the geography of this. I just know the brief statement that you have above the gallery. But yeah, seeing the warmth and the attention to these little, kind of sometimes subtle, sometimes kind of in your face moments, being like the one of the handball court, that are like very much poking at this kind of warmth. I don't want to use the warmth as like a literal descriptor, but also as an emotional descriptor too, because ultimately this work kind of is like a long-term mourning process for you, and kind of making sense of that. And this is a kind of process that I've at least seen in other folks' work in very different ways. One project that came to mind when looking through this work, when reading the statement, is Barbara Bosworth's One Star in a Dark Voyage, which is unfortunately the only book of hers that I own. And I was curious if there were any artists that started to almost act like guides of sort, that have done similar kinds of responding and coping with difficult times, losing a loved one, while you were working on this project.
Yeah, I actually have to check out that book and see what see where the connection is. There wasn't, I guess, one of my favorite photo books ever is A Voice Above the Lynn, and it's by Robbie Lawrence. And I remember kind of buying it on a whim. I was just like, "Oh, this looks cool," and I picked it up. And the story is about a botanist who had this beautiful garden, and he was an older gentleman, and his son left. I think he went to South America to go get some more samples for their, I forgot what you call it, with like their garden
Greenhouse?
In particular. Pardon me?
Oh, a greenhouse? Or
Yeah, like a greenhouse, like both indoor, outdoor. And his son never came back. And they found his body a couple of years later. He had fallen. And so Robbie Lawrence made this work about this guy who's very old now, and the garden's kind of overgrown. And there's some poems in it as well. And it is just a beautiful book. Like it's a very tender, sad book. The images are gorgeous. And I would say that was I modeled the book I want to make with this work kind of from that book. It's a Stanley Barker book. I don't think it's in print now, but I'm sure, maybe you can find one online, or at least look at the images.
Yeah, it looks like the gallery on the website is pretty good. Expansive.
And I love it. It's stunning. And that was the work that kind of emotionally connected me to this. But yeah, it's I've made the work over so long. It wasn't necessarily one thing that kind of anchored it to me. My gateway drug to photo books was Joel Meyerowitz, Keep Light, very New England, right? Classic. Every photo's a banger in there, but the light, and because it resonated with me. Because I grew up in a beach town, right? Which had a subway, which is a very unique thing.
What a dream! New England could never.
I would say that was a very important book to me during this process.
Yeah. I can see, while stylistically different, there are definitely some moments where I can kind of see the logic behind how it had influenced what you had shot and how you kind of put together Swell here. You mentioned that you were taking your dad's bike out to photograph and all that. Were any of the locations that you were photographing of like significance to your parents or specifically your mom, or was it really just kind of in the general area?
So I grew up near Reese Park, which is named after Jacob Reese, the photographer, actually. So it's on the southern tip of Queens. And my father was a lifeguard when he was very young, and met my mother on that beach. I know exactly where the lifeguard chair was. It's in the middle of Reese Park, right by a clock. And they ended up moving to Rockaway, and I was raised out there. I learned to ride a bike in Reese Park. I learned to drive in the parking lot in the wintertime, right, and how to parallel park. I my mom, some of my earliest memories are being on the back of my mom's bike, riding through Reese Park. And while I was going through, so there's a lot of family history there. Like this is an extension of my home, right? This is part of my history, but my parents have a long history there. And when I was going through the project, or when I was after Mom passed, Sandy, it was a big hurricane that hit New York City, for those who don't know. And my parents had 14 feet of water roll through their house. So years after, it took about a year for them to get back their house and move back in. And then Mom passed kind of relatively shortly after, maybe a year or two later. I decided to start digitizing all the family photos because they were in the attic and spared. But I dug deep, man, and I found not just like slides, but I found photos my mom took of the beach, of Rockaway, of Reese Park, and of the ocean, and they faded, and they have these cool like color casts now. And I decided I was playing with the idea of mixing them into the book, and my LTP class really loved it, so I ended up doing that. So the book the project kind of kept growing, and it became a mix of her work and mine. And it was kind of like like a through time kind of collaborative project. So I do play a lot with color in the work as well. You mentioned some of my work earlier, and I've always wanted to shoot infrared film. So about some of the, probably about 3 or 5 images I have kind of simulated infrared, and I've pushed the greens to a red. So those aren't natural reds. And I did it very carefully. I didn't want this project to be like, oh, look, I can make everything red or pink, know. But it's part of the narration, right? When you grieve, your spectrum of experience changes, and at least for me, and it kind of swells up inside of you, and things are weird or different for a little while, and then they kind of goes away. And the intention of that infrared was to kind of show that experience.
Yeah, I was curious about the red. It seemed like the red is like an important color throughout this work. While it's not in every single image, you want to punctuate it to some extent. So one's like the one of the handball court is like an obvious example of that. There's this other one of like vines kind of crawling up the side of a wall. And there's other ones where it looks like there was just already like red leaves or red flower or whatever in the scene. And then the first image on the gallery is that a tide flag, or it's a flag, or
no lifeguard on duty.
No lifeguard, and that's what it means. Yeah. And I think that, like the no lifeguard on duty flag is, I feel like, I'm just now thinking of this now, it feels so potently like about your mom in a sense, because you can interpret it as like your mom as like a kind of lifeguard through life of sort, right? Like, I don't think there's a single human soul that loves their mom that wouldn't see her as some kind of, lifeguard. Yeah. And that no lifeguard on duty flag can like act as a kind of like metaphor for that, which I think is, especially now being reminded of something that coastal folks are acutely aware of, it definitely comes through for that. Now, you kind of touched a little bit already on this. This is, ultimately a very personal project, and you've started to incorporate her old photographs into the book that you put together for the photo book program. How do you feel about the idea of like trying to translate something so deeply personal and communicating that to an audience that knows nothing about your life without having to write a dissertation about it?
I think at the beginning you just make work, right? You just got to make the work, and make the work while you're feeling something, and the work will eventually, I think, kind of speak for itself in a lot of ways. So when I was at Chico, folks would go through the work And sometimes I'd ask, I'm like, do you want me to tell you about the project, or do you want to kind of just do a vibe check? If you have anyone listening is fortunate enough to go to Chico Review, it's good to kind of have some framework for the reviewers, say like, hey, because they're going to figure out what you want from each of them. But basically, a lot of them got they're like, this is sad and lonely, these images. And so I wasn't thinking when I took the photo, how do I make a sad and lonely image? I was just sad and lonely. But it was Tanya Franco-Klein, who was one of my reviewers, and she said to me, she's like, oh, I get that, but there's so much tenderness in this book. Mm-hmm. There's so much love. And I don't see it as complete grief. I see it as a blend. And I had never thought of it that way. And that really kind of changed the trajectory a second time. And I kind of describe it now more as like, you can't, I said to my, I reflected a lot on that. And I said, you can't grieve something you didn't love. Right. Exactly. So, I mean, I think the images that have stuck around the editing process are the ones that kind of convey it the best.
And I think that kind of mentality that Tanya had noted actually comes up a bit in a previous guest conversation, Kelly Burgess, where we talked about her project Root Rot, and it's very much about mental health and all that. And one thing that I noted with her is that I think is applied here in your own stylistic approach is that despite being a very heavy and very personal project, there is an amount of hopefulness that comes through in this. And in this case, that idea of like, it really isn't, photographs or a project about like being sad about your mom passing, but rather a kind of celebration of life about this location, this geography that was so important to not only you, the artist, but also your mom and your dad as well. You are ultimately using your dad's bike after all. So it's important, I think, for those of us that are making these projects about really intensely personal things. There's going to be things that we don't see until a lot later because we'll be just chugging away and something will happen. Something will be pointed out to us like, oh my God, like, yeah, that's what's been going on. Like, this is not some doom and gloom. This is actually a very bright project, despite its very, emotional and tragic backstory behind it. I feel like that's a really good way to kind of go about things.
Yeah, no, I should have you write for me. Just for when I describe my work. I mean, you just pulled that, you made that, and I could find myself be articulate about many things, but for some reason, when I have to describe my own work, it's hard.
It's very challenging to talk about your own work. It's easier to talk about someone else's, which is that's how it goes being an artist. I mean, I think Stephen Shore in his like 2018 republishing or 2019 republishing of Uncommon Places, he has a note at the beginning just describing like, yeah, this is like the complete edition of the work. Hold for the pictures that actually suck, because yes, Stephen Shore, much like all of us, takes bad pictures. Yeah. But Stephen Shore puts in the foreword there that part of the reason why is not just technical improvements and just finding the negatives, all that, but also that he self-admittedly is very bad at editing his own work. That was such a validating thing to read. As someone at that point, I was going into grad school soon, and I was like, oh my God, like one of the goats like self-admitted that he can't edit his own work, and it just made me feel so much better about the creative process. And I'm sure you probably noticed that in the photo book program as well, when people were doing their thing.
Yeah, that is one of the greatest, and not just any program. Like if you do a workshop, right? You meet people who are just like you, and we're all trying to just figure it out, man. Right? We're trying to communicate something, and actually, Eggleston has never edited any of his own books. He just is like, here's a pile of pictures, go make a book.
Yep.
I'll have a cigarette and a scotch, or a bourbon.
He'll only do presentations if he's allowed to smoke during them. Apparently.
Oh, really?
I don't know if that's true. I think that's more of a rumor. But so you brought this to the photo book program for Penumbra Foundation. Tell me about that experience, like what your headspace was like putting this together before the program. And then kind of how it evolved through that. You already talked a little bit about that, but I'm more curious about the overall experience.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to kind of touch on a couple of quick hops that made there.
Yeah.
So I first was realizing that I had, after a while, like a collection of work. And I was like, okay, I want to kind of hammer this into something. So I ended up taking a class with Tim Carpenter, who did a workshop through the Penumbra Foundation. And it was all on sequencing your work. Yep. And he was like, we were chatting, and I got a little some mentorship out of him after that as well. And he was like, I really think you should do the long-term photo book program with this project. You have this body of work. You already did an edit with my workshop. And then I also mentioned how I've always wanted to go to Chico Review, and he was the one who pushed me to apply. So I double thanked him for that. And I ended up applying for both. And then I ended up doing a workshop, being selected by the Stanley Barker Winter Workshop. So I immediately flew out to Cambridge, or not immediately, but did a workshop with them for 2 days, 3 days. And then I was actually the first time, I was 41, first time in Boston, a New Yorker.
Yeah.
I went to the Leica store and did a workshop with Todd Heido for 2 days. The nicest human being. Him and his wife are just so cool and nice, and filled me with hope. So,
just as a side note too, before getting back into that, my second reviewer at Chico, I believe, was Todd Heido, and same kind of response. Like, he's so nice. And when I showed him Perennial in the version of the book that it was then, it has evolved a bit now, partially because of Chico. He was one of the folks that, like, without too much primer about the work, he just was like, yeah, like, I get it. I understand this is some good stuff. And he could relate to it given his own background in Ohio and then out to California.
Oh, right.
So it was really interesting, like, hearing that from an artist whom I've, like, admired for so long. I was, like, shaking in my boots about, like, I don't know if one, what to ask him, and two, how he's going to respond to it, because it is thankfully different from his work. But anyway, that's just kind of a more testament to sometimes meeting your heroes is actually a good thing.
Yeah. You know? It was great. He actually he remembered me, and they said hi to me at Chico, which kind of blew my mind. But then I ended up starting long-term photo book program. And for anybody who's interested, I highly recommend it. And I do recommend they do a nice Zoom call at the beginning for people who are interested. But what that program did for the work was, there was a lot of, the first half of the program, I would say, was very like academic theory is a good word. Like we kind of go through the abstract concepts of photo books and sequencing. And then the second half, I think you start kind of really drilling into your work. But it was just great to have peers and to share your work and see your work. I don't have any really artistic friends in my friend group. Right. So I've always been kind of running along by myself, making work, and I never really had any kind of community. And so these various experiences I started sewing a community together, which I think is almost as valuable as getting a formal training and having other people who are just interested and passionate about their own work. And yeah, the edit got ripped apart several times and rebuilt, and now I'm very happy with it. And the edit in particular, the work that's in there, and it was definitely worth the investment and the time for me. And you get what you put in as well. So, did that answer your question? I kind of went on a story. I'm sorry.
Yeah. But yeah, because we also did already talk a little bit about kind of how people responded to the work as well earlier. Yeah. So yeah, getting to know the kind of structure and like how you got to that point. So more just a curiosity from like a logistics standpoint about the photo book program. So you wound up physically making like a maquette at the end of that? I don't really know the structure of that.
Yeah, so at the end you do make a physical book with your edit and a copy. They ask you to make like at least 3. So one for your own archive, keep it, and then one to show folks, and then one to put in the LTP library at the Penumbra Foundation. So I'm not a bookmaker, and I live in a very small condo in New York, where I literally I have a photo printer in my bedroom closet, and I had to drill a hole in the wall to keep it plugged in, because it'll do an ink check every time I try to turn it on. And I have one small kitchen table. I wasn't prepared to invest a lot in bookmaking supplies, and so I ended up using and a few of us did. We used like different printing services. I used Whitewall, which actually had kind of like a very high end printing service they had just launched. And I made a maquette, and I like it. It's not the grand final vision of the project that I have in my head, but it was really cool to have it and be able to flip through it and to show folks. So, it's if there's a place in New York I think you can rent studio space and make books. There's like it's somewhere in Flatiron. And I've been thinking about doing that because I'd love to make it like closer to what's in my brain.
It's like at home, like I have, since I've been trying to put together some zines, and one of the only things holding me back is that I need like the material to make it, but I have the apparatus to do so.
Gotcha.
But I can only do like saddle stitch. I can do like hand stitched, like, regular zines. I can do like a big stapler that I can do the saddle stitching with that. And I have a book press back there, but I can only do like smaller books because it's not this robust, like crazy, like 200-year-old book press.
Yeah.
And my afternoon job, I have an ancient guillotine that if you got to keep your fingers away from that thing because it will not stop. Once you pull the lever, it will not stop. But it's obviously very good at what it does. And one of my hopes is to make use of that and get some zines out there. But
that's
I would
awesome,
love to make a hardcover, like do all that by hand. It's difficult. It takes a lot of practice.
Yeah. I want to do a bookmaking workshop as well. And again, that's kind of, like I said, the beauty, like in your MFA program, and not to get too far off of topic, like how much of that was there in the MFA program at all, like bookmaking, or is it just something you're kind of expected to drill into on your own?
It wasn't like an expectation, but it was partially because like every photo MFA is like results in some kind of book at the end of it, right? It was almost like an unspoken kind of like, you don't have to make a book, but like you probably will make a book. There is a bookmaking class at UMass Dartmouth, but I wasn't able to take it because of, I think, mostly scheduling. Like it was overlapping with like seminars and other things I had lined up. I wound up learning how to do saddle stitching and everything and like glue binding, all that, just kind of on my own with a little bit of guidance from my teachers. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting learning it very informally, especially leading up to Chico, because I wound up getting the book professionally bound in California, partially because of time, but also because like if I were to invest a lot of time and energy into it, I would have less time to spend on my writing part of the thesis, which is the part that gets you the degree. So it's like I should probably spend time on that and outsource the actual binding. But it was still important for me. I felt it was still important for me to learn how to at least learn the basics of book binding, even if I didn't get into the weeds of like making a cloth bound hardcover beautiful object, you know.
Yeah, I don't know of really. As I look at my photography shelf with all my books, these were all made with a publisher. And I mean, I know some photographers do their own little, they do some smaller books on the side or for various projects. But, you know, the intention of this book is to find a publisher to partner with and to, you know, do a run. There are people who are better at building books than I'll ever be, and getting their wisdom and knowledge and their expertise is part of the process, you know, right?
Yeah, I remember on a Sasha Wolf show, one of the episodes with Brian Skutmott, he talked a bit about Trespasser and kind of the beginnings of that. I am very happy to have one of the copies of Good Goddamn, because that particular book, from what I know, it wasn't bound by like some like crazy book publisher kind of thing. It was by like a local company where the bulk of their clientele was like churches making like bulletins and stuff. Like, they had the stuff, and I think they used like box staples, like those really thick box staples.
Yeah.
Just like drilled the two holes. So there's like spacing for those two box staples. And like that was the binding process, and it was like on just regular acid-free paper, nothing crazy. It was on like a thick, heavy stock construction paper kind of thing with like the printing of the what looks like pencil. Now, something that I like to bring up is a subject matter that I feel like we as artists need to talk more about, and that is the less than fun stuff. The boring stuff.
Oh, yeah.
When we're not taking pictures, when we're not in the studio editing, you know, it's us viewers, we see photographers come out with these books and these exhibitions, these projects, and it feels like this magical object that appears every 2 or so years. And we don't get a lot of insight into kind of the in-betweens of the shooting. So I'm curious, you know, what is your daily life like in regard to, you know, your art life? You don't have to talk about like your work life per se, but like the kind of things, like what lives between the photo shoots and the studio sessions?
Mostly anxiety, and feeling like I'm worthless as an artist. I'm the only one who feels that way, who makes art. I think there's tremendous value in what you're saying about just being honest about how it works. And when I listen to different photographers talk about their work, you know, sometimes they'll be like, "Oh, I made this book, and then I made this book," but both those that work is decades old sometimes, right?
Yep.
So they might be getting a couple of books out at once, but they didn't have anything for decades even.
Yeah, so they may have not even picked up a camera for 5-10 years.
So, you know, a lot of my work in particular is a lot of vegetation, green, outdoors, even outside of this project. And I've been struggling because I hate winter as well. So I've been very conscious of trying to do work that is different, new projects that can be more seasonal. And I think that's important for artists to have more than one iron in the fire, move around, do different things. I work a very technical job in my 9 to 5, you know, a lot of project management and Jira and
very fun things.
Yeah. Very, you know, working with a lot of software engineers. And so it's one side of my brain lights up all week, and it's hard. I struggle with trying to come home and I'm like, I want to work on my art. I want to archive rummage. I want to conceptually think things, but it's like a muscle, right? Like you've been working one out all week. The other one takes time to warm up. And that's a struggle for me. And when it comes to the boring stuff too, I bring a camera with me whenever I leave the city. I'm not a street photographer, so I live in New York, and yet that doesn't call to me. But I try to squeeze it in. Like if I go out of town for a wedding or whatever, or visit my in-laws in California, I will try and tack on a day with my wife, or make some work. And bless her, I'm like, we need to pull over. I have to photograph that sign or that weird fence. And she's like, okay, so yeah. And one thing I started doing with LTP, my Sarah Winston, who ran the program last year, was she got me into journaling with a pen, and I just pour out my anxieties and what's going through my mind with my work. And it is actually a very helpful tool that I keep a journal. I kept a journal for like over 12, 15 years of my life, like day to day, but having one specifically for my art, was a really good exercise. And I don't write in it every week even, but when I'm stuck or I'm not feeling it, I'll start writing in there. And at the end of the day, it always comes to the same thing. It's like, all right, well, you got that out. Just go make some work. It doesn't matter if it's good or bad. Just go. And it does, you got to exercise it, right? You just got to, don't worry if it's going to hang up in the moment one day, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's not, you're not making work for that.
Yeah, I think the analogy of exercising like muscles or just like literal body exercise, because it is a really useful thing for younger artists of experience or age to think about it, because you don't want to go for a run every day unless you're like you're someone that is like trained for that, right? And even then those people aren't doing it literally all year usually, but if you're just like an everyday person, you don't want to do arm day 3 days in a row. You don't want to shoot the same thing so frequently. And you need that time to wind down. You need to, have a certain diet outside of the exercise that fuels that. In the analogy of the diet could be like, what media are you consuming outside of making the work? I think there's a lot of like health analogies that you can apply to art making, because, for a lot of us, making art is what keeps us sane. And sometimes, I really like pizza, but I can't be having pizza literally all the time because it's going to be a problem at a certain point. So you can use the same analogy, and you need certain things. You need to eat your vegetables, I think, is what other folks have brought up in the past, is like you need to have these other facets that keep you moving, even if it doesn't feel productive. It keeps you steady. Doing
what you said about maintaining the diet as well, like of your media. I have I don't watch a lot of I don't watch a lot of TV in general. But I do I love YouTube in particular. I watch a lot of science channels and all that, but I've pruned it very tightly. So that way it's mostly nothing bad, right? Like it's all stuff that keeps me curious. And there's a lot of great lectures on there with photographers and different artists, and, make that point of, I'm going to listen to this instead of watching Stranger Things or something, and
exactly.
You do, when I don't feel like making work, I'll take a walk, and I'll grab my camera and I'll put on, a podcast, and, with some kind of art related, and it gets you going, it's kind of like going for a run. The worst part of the run's the first couple steps, and then it's fine, right? So
once you are done with it, you will be sweaty and gross, but you'll still be happy about having done it.
No one ever regrets. Once you exercise, no one ever regrets doing it.
Yeah, and that's something too with the creative process that I find interesting is like recently, the blizzard that came through up here recently. We had two technically, I suppose, and this is more for the first one from January. That one. Though that was the one that they were advertising or promoting as like historic and everything, and then the second blizzard came and it actually was historic. So the first one that was less historic than the second one. That's where we're at. I've been going down to photograph this tree. I've brought it up in like every single interview for this season so far, but it's present. Been going down to photograph this one tree, technically two trees in Newport, and I learned that a friend of mine who went to RISD, she had also been photographing the same tree for a long time. She's moved out of New England since, and I went to take pictures of the tree one like a few days after that first snowstorm that came through. I don't know what made me think that there wouldn't be over a foot of snow on the path leading up to the tree. I don't know what made me think that was going to be cleared. It's a gravel path. It's, ultimately I did make my way over there. But, it was one of those moments that made me think like, why the hell am I doing this? Yeah. And I took like 20 pictures and, some of them I'm happy with. But it's one of those moments of like, did I need to go out there? Kind of, yeah. It's like it is this need to make the work. And that even then, sometimes taking the first picture is what you need, and then sometimes you only take a couple, and that's okay. I do think that Ansel Adams is a little extreme in his my paraphrasing here about like one good photo a year is a good year kind of thing. I'm like, okay, that's a little extreme, but also you're Ansel Adams, so I can't really complain or criticize him too much. So how would you say that this project, Swell, lives among your other projects that you have on your portfolio site now that it's kind of reached this point of you're kind of figuring things out? How does it live with the other work?
Yeah. Well, I have some other projects, right, and that I work on. And Swell was great because it kind of was building it and completing it was a huge learning experience, not just as a photographer. Well, going from making photos to becoming a photographer, I guess you would say, right?
Yeah.
I find that a lot of the work I make is it was Tanya Franco Klein who said in Chico was all her projects are kind of world building, and that they all kind of link together. And I think a lot of it wasn't something I do intentionally, but when I look at my work, a lot of it is kind of internal. It's kind of I'm matching images that exist in me that are already out in the world, and and then telling a story. I love to tell a story. I always write little ideas down for books or movies or whatever. And, some of the other projects I'm working on now are with that intention of one being something different that I can work on different times of the year. But they all kind of tell some kind of broader story. And I think my next body of work that I want to be isn't just necessarily, I want it to be a story of maybe something that's real and maybe something that's not, right? It doesn't matter. I want you to just kind of accept it as when you sit with it and you go through it. And just knowing that is kind of my North Star with, and having kind of a couple of broad brushstrokes of where it's going to go, it's starting to reveal itself to me. And, it's I'm a chronic daydreamer, so I've always been that way.
That's a prerequisite for artists.
Yeah, and so I start off just writing a little idea down, and then I did some homework for LTP, and I made this little zine for it, and I got a big emotional response out of it, and I was like, okay, there's something here. And I forgot where the quote was I heard recently is like, if no one hates your art or loves it, and then it's not worth making. Like you have to get some kind of feeling out of folks.
Having a visceral response, including hating. Honestly, it's kind of fun to make someone hate your work.
So, I annoy software engineers all day. So I was like, okay, I've been raised by your anger. It's part of me now, like Bane and Batman.
Yeah, that's it's interesting because like looking through your site portfolio, like of course there's some aesthetic similarities periodically. There's a lot of where ultimately a lot of us kind of approach scenes throughout our creative lives, kind of employing certain motifs by composition or subject or whatever that you just can't get away from sometimes. Sometimes you just can't resist it. But at the same time, like that's where the editing comes in and you start to figure out like how can you take some of these visual motifs that are consistent and have these concepts come through that are so much more than just like an aesthetic exercise, that are so much more in tune with emotional and human experience. And I think that the work that you have on your site really does prod at that. I'm especially interested to see how this Hollowell project that you have on your site comes together. It looks like you say more to come, and I'm curious what the more to come.
Yeah, I'm not, strangely, I don't know what to put on my website, but that's a project about a paper town. And so for folks who don't know, paper towns were fake places that were put on maps, so that way people would steal other map makers' designs. They didn't know that wasn't a real town, but the map maker knew it was fake, and then if a competitor had that town, they would sue them. You stole my work. So
exactly,
and finding a reference to a paper town and pulling on that thread is kind of, how do you photograph a place that you can never go to?
A place that doesn't actually exist.
Yeah, but you kind of have a concept of it. So that's kind of what that project's going to be.
That's exciting. Is that like what you're working on these days, or is there other work that you're focused on these days? And now that Swell is starting to kind of get to the tail end,
those are the two right now, that hottest irons in the fire, I would say. I'm always photographing, and there's different things that are bubbling up, but not enough they haven't revealed enough of what they are to me yet to kind of tell folks about. And if you're listening, and you're on that journey, it's okay. Just make your work. It'll come together. I was, what was it? I think it's Raymond Meeks's Cyprin Honey Cathedral. And I remember listening to him talk about that body of work. And it wasn't something he made with the intention of it being a book. It was just stuff from his archive that he combined together to make a body of work. I love California. My wife's from California. I'm an East Coaster my whole life, basically. And whenever I go out there, I make so much work. I'm just mesmerized, and I love the light. And I know my bodies of work seem to have like a thread of color. It's like first one's red, the next one seems to be black. I think the next one's going to be yellow. It just seems to be revealing itself. So maybe one day, I like kind of the idea of having that as a part of my DNA with my work.
Yeah. Well, that's probably about it for the main conversation then. Where can people find your work, your social media, all that jazz?
Yeah. I'm on Instagram, Rich Dachtera, at Rich Dachtera, one word. My website is the same domain name, and both point to each other. And you could find me there. I, always feel free to reach out if anybody has any questions. And I'm a lot scarier in real life.
It's true. When I first met him, I was terrified.
Yeah, I am 7 feet tall, arms like tree trunks.
Your hands are dragging on the floor, actually.
Yeah. And it was, honestly, man, it was so great to be here with you, and I was honored that you reached out to me, and I admire you and your work. Yeah, man, I'm very excited to see what you also make in the future.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to see how Swell will come together. Hope to see a book of that in the future, however long it takes. But yeah, thank you so much. It was great to really discuss this work and get into the weeds in it, and yeah, get to know you a little bit more as an artist and all that. So we'll talk soon.
All right.
And for folks listening, thank you all for being here, hearing us yap about this stuff for a while, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you for listening to Ready for Mistakes. This series of interviews is entirely self-produced and self-funded and would not be possible without the generosity of guests' time and willingness to participate. If you would like to support the show, I will not take your money, and instead I ask you to subscribe and follow on our various social media profiles, and of course to share it with your friends. Do you want to come on the show and discuss your work? Submit to the form in the show notes and put your name in the hat. Thank you again, and I'll see you in the next one.